In this episode of Nerdy Romantics Podcast, we will continue our discussion of Superman and Lois seasons 3 and 4. In particular, we're going to talk about season 4 and the Lex Luthor portrayal, what we liked and what we didn't like about it. We'll talk about the correlation between this season and the Death of Superman comic, the Doomsday character. We'll talk a little bit about some of the scenes that we really liked in this season. And of course, we'll wrap it up with a discussion of the very last episode of this series and give this series and the seasons that we discussed a GoodReads rating. As with our previous episode, there will be spoilers of Superman and Lois, all 4 seasons. So, if you have watched Superman and Lois, please stay tuned. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. So, season 4, we've talked a lot about it already, but the one big thing that we haven't talked about that's at the top of my list is Lex Luthor, which I thought we were going to see in season 3, but this is season 4.
Well, we do see him at the end of season 3.
Yeah, at the end. But season 4 is really his season. He's the big bad in season 4. And for me, the first thing that struck me, even in season, because we do see him a little bit at the end of season 2 and at the end of season 3, is his look. So, I grew up on the Christopher Reeve Superman. So, Gene Hackman was Lex Luthor in that. And of course, the most recent kind of iteration, I would say, would be John Cryer being Lex Luthor, but they all have a look, they have a certain look. And this Lex does not look like any of them, at least in the beginning, because he does clean himself up. So I'm just wondering, where did they get this look from and what was that about? And was it because he was in prison and he was trying to look like a certain group?
Yeah, I feel like it was just kind of like a reflection of what he'd been through in like the, I think it says 17 years he was in prison.
Yeah.
I think that was because, we see the flashbacks of him in season 4 and he's got the full head of hair, which I thought was a definite choice.
Yes, right? I was like, what are you doing here?
Now, and I know a lot of fans have quibbled about this, but I actually like the idea of a bald bearded Lex Luthor. I like the idea of him having the beard and everything. So I thought John Cryer's, I had some issues with John Cryer's overall performance, but I think his overall look, like the shaved head and the beard, was and for anyone who can't see me on this, but I'm a bald bearded guy myself, so there's probably some bias coming through there. But
all of our Spotify fans.
Yeah, so I like that. I like that kind of look that, we first saw it. John Cryer, I think, was the first one to do it. If you saw the last season of Titans, there was Titus Welliver played Lex Luthor in like one episode, and he killed it. He did such an amazing job in that part. But he also had the bearded look. He had shaved head and he had a much bushier beard. Like his beard was like, and then they showed the first images of Michael Cudlitz with the shaved head and the kind of like, I didn't like the idea of like this long goatee thing. I thought that was kind of
I didn't like that either.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't like the wig they gave him in.
Yeah,
whatever,
I was like, what are they doing? Why are they showing us that?
Yeah.
They didn't even need to show us that.
Yeah.
That was like a moment. Oh gosh, that was a moment.
But also,
didn't need.
but I thought they did such a great job of introducing him at the end of season 3. And, he came in as
Yeah.
just like this powerful presence. And then he unleashes Doomsday, and we get that amazing ending of season 3, like the Rocky freeze frame ending, right? When him
Right.
and Doomsday are charging at each other in the moon. Mm.
Exactly. It's like,
And then,
oh
so
gosh.
I was so psyched for this season to see what we were gonna go with it. And I mean, Cudlitz is okay. I think he's a really good actor. But I feel like I'm not a big fan of this take on Luther. I think he's just too single-minded. Whereas I'm thinking, some of the more nuanced portrayals like Michael Rosenbaum on Smallville, or John Shea even on Lois and Clark, or even though he got a little bit soap opera-y at times, but I thought overall he did a pretty decent job as Lex Luthor. Or like I mentioned, Titus Welliver on Titans, or even, Clancy Brown in Superman the Animated Series. And I feel like this version of Lex, I think they were leaning a little bit too, separating from Gene Hackman is a good thing, because I think the Gene Hackman interpretation is kind of loomed over a little bit too large
Yeah.
in like the Superman Returns version with Kevin Spacey, or also, what John Cryer was doing in the Arrowverse stuff.
Hmm.
So I'm glad we're leaning away from the Hackman inspired take, but I think too they kind of forgot what they did so well with Bruno Mannheim, was like rooting the character in this humanity. They lost sight of that with Lex Luthor in this season, I feel.
Yeah. They even said, you know, Lois even says that in one of the later episodes. She's like, why are you still coming after me? When she gets frustrated or whatever, before she actually goes to the jail with Bruno Mannheim, when she's like totally frustrated, because at that point, Lex's daughter, who we see in one of the middle episodes, is trying, and we thought that, or at least I thought that she
Mm-hmm.
would be the grounding force, kind of like Bruno has his family, right? And
Right.
his neighborhood too, but definitely his family and definitely his wife. But I thought that Lex's daughter was going to do that, because I thought that she was the reason them not speaking, because Lois put him in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that them getting together and her being able to talk him down was going to work. And when everybody saw that it didn't work, it was like, why are you trying to come after these? I mean, what is it? It was very obsessive, and kind of, for me, with his motorcycle club kind of look, going on too, with that obsessive kind of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very not good.
Yeah.
There's no way I could really say that, but it felt very white supremacist kind of feeling, and very much that kind of vibe that happens in those kind of circles. It's like, why do you keep going after somebody when there's morally, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? What's the motivation? That was the thing.
Yeah.
What was the
Especially because
motivation?
Yeah, especially because, like, I mean, he got back everything he had the chance to get back. The only thing that was still
Yes.
missing was his daughter from that. And I guess like they're trying to I think it would have worked so much better if, and also we should mention that Elizabeth Henstridge played his daughter, also named Elizabeth.
Right.
She was also on Agents of Shield. She played Simmons on Agents of Shield, and she also directed a bunch of these episodes in season 3 and in season 4.
Really?
In
Oh,
fact, the
wow.
episode where she plays Elizabeth was directed by her. She directed that. She directed herself in that episode.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, really really cool to see like she was getting so much play. Also, just another note, Amy Jo Johnson, the Pink Ranger from Power Rangers, Kimberly, she directed some of the
Yes.
episodes of this series as well. I think in season 2 she directed some episodes.
Oh my gosh, that's wow. Oh, that is so cool.
And Michael
That's like
Cudlitz also
that's
directed at least one episode here too.
oh wow, he did. So that's so
Yeah, yeah.
surprising. It's cool.
But yeah, so this, I mean, yeah, I think like if Elizabeth had rejected Lex, I think then his obsession, like going too far, I think might have made more sense, might have hit a little bit better if she ultimately, like, if Lois and Clark are trying to say like, no, no, give him another chance and all this, and she's just like, no, I'm not going to give him another chance. I don't want to
Right.
exp- I don't think he can be redeemed or anything like that. I think that would have landed a little bit better than her trying to give him another chance and him still saying like, I'm still going to do this stuff anyway. Because I feel like that
Right.
sapped a lot of the humanity out of him. Because at this point, like, okay, now you've gotten back everything you've lost. So what are we still doing here?
Right. You know, and at that point, he showed less humanity than the Doomsday character who's looking
Yeah.
at Lois and is like, I remember Bizarro Lois. I remember our
Hmm.
family. It's like, are you kidding me? I have no idea about the Doomsday character in the comic, but here it's like, you know, you at the end at
Hmm.
Doomsday's doom, you actually, you kind of felt something. You felt a little. It's like, okay, he realized, all right, it's my time to, yeah, just push me on into the sun. And
Hmm.
that's another thing too. That's another thing that I was wondering. I was like, is Superman really going to kill him? Because that's another thing about Superman. Like, Superman doesn't kill people, right? It's
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, Superman is not, he's too good. He's not going to kill people. He's not going to kill him. And he's especially not going to kill, somebody who was him in another, in a bizarro world, but it was almost kind of like a mercy kind of thing. Like, he was like, Doomsday. I'm no longer
Yeah.
the person, that I'm something else, and just push me into
Hmm.
the sun kind of thing. It was like he was kind of giving him permission. I was like, oh my gosh,
Well,
this
it's
is
very similar to the Pia's death in that way, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. It was a lot like that. Yes,
Now, one of my
and
quibbles with the
yeah,
the the death of Superman aspect of it is, and I feel I'm not sure if this was a result of the fact that this ended up being the final season, which wasn't necessarily originally the plan, because they had
okay,
also introduced some other characters in here, like Milton Fine, who is Brainiac in the comics,
okay,
was
yeah,
introduced here, and they had also the producers had said that they had actually plans for like a fifth season, up to like a sixth season. I think they had plans up to season six,
oh
and
wow,
they had Tom Cavanaugh comes in here, not playing any of the characters he played on the Arrowverse, but instead he's
right,
playing G. Gordon Godfrey, who's a character in the comics who is working for Darkseid. And so they were actually planning to eventually lead up to like a Darkseid thing in this show as well, which obviously, so I feel like this was all kind of truncated and they had to like kind of like jam in both the death of Superman and the Lex Luthor stuff into this one season. And I feel like the death of Superman stuff got a little bit shafted because I don't feel like they gave that story really kind of the
they,
room to
yeah,
breathe that it needed. I mean, that last episode of season 3 was amazing. I was on the edge of my seat when they cut to credits at that final scene.
yes,
And then and I loved the first episode of this season too. But it's basically like it's what, three, yeah, it's like 3 episodes and then Clark
yes,
is back. And so
right,
that was, and there's a whole thing in the comics, right? And after the death of Superman, there's the reign of the Supermen, where there are these 4 different Superman characters who each show up basically claiming like the title of Superman. And this is where we got introduced to Steel in the comics. This is where we got introduced to the more modern Superboy in the comics. And you also had 2 other ones, the Eradicator and the Cyborg Superman. And I think we had all the pieces to do that in this
yeah,
season. You had
yeah,
Steel, you had Superboy
yeah,
in the form of Jordan, you had the
right.
Eradicator stuff from, his brother in the first season, and then all you need, the other piece of that is the Cyborg Superman aspect. So I feel like they could have found a way to do like their own take of Reign of the Supermen, and I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't go down that route, or at least some version of it, because I feel like as much as we've done the death of Superman so many times, that other side of it has almost never been done, except for like once it was adapted in animated form. And I think that would have been interesting to see happen here, but they didn't have the time, they didn't have the budget either, too, because this season like the budget got slashed.
Oh, okay. So that's what it was about. I felt like
Well,
it
that's
was
also
a
why the focus is so much also on Lex Luthor,
on
because
Lex. Okay.
the supporting cast, they got downgraded all from like main cast to like supporting to like guest stars.
Yeah.
So they were given, and like I think in the end their credits were actually, they got credited as like the main cast, but they didn't appear as much as they did in previous episodes. Like Sarah's basically gone in this season. We barely see
Yeah.
anything of her.
And then in the last couple, or well, not the last couple, but the last, yeah, she's basically gone. And then she actually, they talk about her going to university kind of thing. And I didn't think we were going to see her in that very last
Mhm.
episode, but we did see her a little bit in that very last episode. Her sister, I don't even,
Yeah,
was she even there in there?
I don't think she was. I think that was a case of, was it Morgan on Boy Meets World, where she ends up going up to her room for like 5 years,
Right,
or Judy on
exactly.
Family Matters.
Right, exactly. It's like, what happened? But yeah, and it was another character too. I was like, what happened? Oh, they built up the whole, relationship with Natalie and Mateo, but we don't see Mateo at
Yeah,
all.
that's right. Natalie doesn't really appear that much either in this season.
Natalie,
She was also.
exactly. Natalie's like, and when you were talking about the cyborg, now she's not a cyborg, but she, does have a suit, so they
Mhm.
could have manifested her into a fourth kind of character, not a cyborg character, but into a fourth character if that was what they were going to do. But you're right. I felt because I know about is at least that particular comic, the Death of Superman comic. At least I know about that comic, but I don't know exactly what happens in all of it. So from my perspective with the season, it felt like Lex was getting this much
Mhm.
and the Death of Superman was getting this much. And the whole thing with his heart and Lois's dad sacrificing himself so that he could give Superman a heart. I like how that happened, but B, I also didn't like how that happened because I was like, are they trying to just kill him off so we don't have to see him anymore? What was going on with that? And
Yeah,
two,
that was
it's a
a. I think
human
that was a
heart.
result of the. Yeah, yeah. I think that was a result of the cast cutting, because originally he had said that he wasn't going to be coming back, Dylan Walsh, and then later it was revealed that he was going to be coming back in this one episode. So,
Yeah, okay.
or two episodes,
So
yeah. So
yeah, it's 2.
so yeah, so
Hmm.
yeah, everyone had got cut down due to budget cuts, but they were all given the option to come back as a guest star. So that's why all the supporting cast gets downgraded in this story. Michael Cudlitz was a main cast member in this, so that's why he is such a large presence throughout this
Right.
whole season. Which, yeah, I feel like they should have found a better way to do that, because I feel like we got too much Luthor, basically. Just, it's funny. It's the
Yes.
contrast where like it was in Titans, where I was saying we didn't get enough. Here we got too much of him.
Right. We got too much of him here. Yes. Yeah, way too much, especially when he gets that obsessiveness, because
Hmm.
by that point it gets old, right? You
Yeah.
know, the most entertaining part is and of course I've already talked about this, but most entertaining part is when Lois goes to Bruno Mannheim in the jail. That's like some of
Hmm.
the most entertaining stuff at that point. After he gets obsessive, after his daughter goes away, after the fight with him and Clark and all of that, it's just like it just becomes obsessive. And actually too, it kind of loses the plot a little bit because at one point he was trying to infiltrate the whole town, right?
Hmm.
It was about Lois, yes, but he also had kind of a plan going on, and they kept talking about between him and the, I think her name is Amanda. Is that her character
Yeah, Amanda
name?
McCoy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I just remember her actual name because it's the same as mine. And they were talking about this plan. We were starting to see it. It was starting to come together, and then he goes off the rails. So we don't really necessarily see the plan. manifest because he's just becoming obsessed. But then Amanda, she has a plan going on, but I don't understand what her motivation was either. Like, what
Yeah.
was actually what actually were they trying to do? With Bruno Mannheim and that whole story, we knew what he was actually trying to do. We knew his plan. And so everything that happens, the whole meeting between Pia and Lois, and they just happen to be in this hospital, and all of that, it kind of comes together. And it's like a puzzle coming together. And this is the
Mhm.
nerdy part of me. I need that. If you're going to talk about a plan, and you're going to talk about a puzzle or something coming together, I need to see that happen. Not
Yeah.
that it just totally breaks down and then you become obsessed. That is a letdown for me, and that's where I think the Luther character kind of lets me down, right? And
Yes, yeah.
that's where
I feel
the
like he should have had the revenge is all fine and well, but I think he needed to have something else pushing him for this, and he didn't. And I think that was and we had also too. You go back to season one, you had Morgan Edge, Talrow. Like he had an actual plan. He had something he was working towards, building
yes,
towards. But
yes,
and that's the kind of or Bruno as well, right? He had this whole
right,
big scheme. He's trying to work. He's got reasons for what he's doing, and it's like that is Lex Luthor's thing. He is, this master planner. He's this great strategist.
right.
And they just they shortchanged him with that and just focusing by making this such a single-minded focus on revenge.
Exactly. Because I mean, even I know that, Lex Luthor is supposed to be like a genius, right? It's supposed
Mhm.
stuff is supposed to, it's supposed to come together in some kind of master plan. He's not just going to be this focus of I've got to destroy Lois in any way possible. That doesn't jive with the Lex that I know. And then,
Mhm.
also at the end to have the brain character
Brainiac,
yes, but what was his actual? Because they
Milton
didn't
Fine.
call him Brainiac. Yeah, Milton Fine. So to have him come in to be the brains per se, right? And he's like, make me this suit. Isn't there a point somewhere in the comics, or maybe it's just something I've watched at some point where Lex Luthor does get some kind of suit or does get some kind of
Yeah, yeah,
enhancements?
yeah. He's
So,
very
but
famous image is
not
like
like
this
we
green power
saw.
suit.
Yeah.
No, that's what I kind of annoyed me because you see like the heads up display. It's got like the green and purple color scheme, but they didn't even. So I'm like, this is such a key aspect of the character. Why aren't you just going to paint the suit green like you do in all the other versions? So yeah, that
Right.
was that was another disappointment. However, though, that fight between Clark and Lex outside the hotel when he reveals like the red sunlight lamps and they have to have the
Yes.
physical conf, I thought that was awesome. That was really well done.
That was awesome. It's the kind of same kind of feeling that you got with Emmett a little bit. That was awesome. He couldn't be Superman because of the red lamps, right? So he was just
Mhm.
Clark, and he was just like, "Listen, don't f with my family, yo. Don't f
Yeah,
with
yeah.
my town." He was, yeah, and it was just all out. And yes, I loved it. I loved it too. I mean, yeah, that was totally awesome, that fight.
Now we also get the episode 7, regular guy. So this is something they do is they reveal Clark reveals he's Superman to the world.
Mhm.
So before I start talking about this, I was curious, what did you think of that whole aspect of it?
He's kind of forced a little bit to do it, and he has the family part, right? That dynamic, I've never really seen that dynamic. I've seen him having to deal with it himself, but now that he has kids who have superpowers and they want to be on Instagram or whatever, or they just want to be kids, and they're like, I don't understand, Dad, why you have to hide this so much. Seeing that whole part of it and them do that dynamic with the whole, now I need to reveal that I'm Clark Kent, I'm also Superman kind of thing. That layer was a really neat layer to see that I have never seen before.
Mhm.
So I kind of like how they did that. I'm not sure how I feel in general Although I will say this, I like them going back to the Daily Planet and seeing Jimmy
Hmm.
Olsen, be not as obnoxious as he normally is in other things. And then wasn't that his sister, Janet Olsen?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was neat, but I think the whole we're going to interview you in your home and those kinds of things, and that's how we're going to do it. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I will say that it's probably the most modern way we've seen him come out.
Hmm.
What did you
So
think?
it was I'm mixed on it. I'm not sure when the episode's going to come out, especially in relation to this, but I was recently on my friend Superman podcast, Digging for Kryptonite, and we talked about this episode and like the idea of like the Clark Kent secret identity and all that. And I think it's a very valuable thing to the character. And I feel like when you do kind of lose something when you take that away, and they done this twice in the comics fairly recently. It happened twice actually.
Wow.
Yeah, the first time it happened, it was like this kind of like reboot type thing that I mentioned before, where
Yeah.
his identity gets outed, and he's not married or anything like that, but he still has to deal with it, and he ends up also getting depowered as well. So it led to a really interesting story. I thought it did a really cool job. But then this other story they did, they had gotten rid of that. They'd kind of done like a soft kind of reboot type thing, and then the writer who came on a little bit after that also did a story where Clark Kent decides that lying about his secret identity, lying about the fact that he's Superman is the writer had this bizarre thing that like, well, that's how can the character be for truth and justice if he's always lying about who he is? I'm like, that's no, I think that makes it interesting.
Oh.
But he did this story where Clark reveals to the world that he's Superman, and it was just bad. It was badly done because and they had to like do this thing where here's the thinker, he was still going to keep his job at the Daily Planet as a reporter, and, and so they had to do this thing where,
Oh.
okay, so his parents' house gets like this force field technology around it, the Daily Planet gets this. I'm just like, no, this sounds like what a little kid's idea of what this stuff will be. Like it's like, well, we'll just put
Yeah,
a force
no.
field around it. But I thought that it handled it in a pretty interesting way. I thought it was because this is a world where, first off, you're in the last season, okay? So you know there's not going to be anything else going on here.
Right.
And we do have this thing at the end where he talks about how they set up this foundation and everything. So it's not like he's going to work at the Daily Planet or anything like that. So
Right.
I think if you're gonna do a story where Clark reveals that he's Superman and he's not going to be still trying to be Clark Kent and working at the Daily Planet and all that, that makes more sense. I can kind of jive with that a little bit. That said, I think would have been more interesting is what I thought they were leading to. Because like when they go to Manning, the farm, right? Luthor's trying to purchase all this land so he can
Mhm.
build his new headquarters,
Mhm.
and she refuses it, right? Everyone refuses the $10 million. And then they go
Right.
and they go to talk to her and like, that's a lot of money you turned down. And she's like, it's nothing compared to what you've done for us. And and I thought what they were gonna do is this whole idea is like, did you watch Buffy?
Yes. Yeah.
Remember the end of the third season when they're at the prom and they're giving out the class awards and they give Buffy the award of class protector and they're like, look,
Yep. Yep.
Sunnyvale's not like normal high schools. We know there's
Right.
weird that
We
happens
know,
here,
and yeah,
and
exactly.
you have been there protecting us. Like, and this whole thing is like it's been this open secret about Buffy this whole time. And so I think I would have liked the idea if that's what it was like in Smallville. I think that would have also reflected like a more accurate version of like a small town dynamic where it's like, yeah, we
Right.
know, but we're not going to tell anyone about it, right? This is our town secret type of thing. I think that would have been a far
Exactly.
more interesting dynamic to play with than what they did.
I agree. And it would have kept the whole realness that they had built up in season 3, because everybody, well, if you haven't lived in a small town, you don't know, but I grew
Mhm.
up in a small town, and my mom complains all the time about running into people that she
Yeah. Well,
knows. I mean,
I
and
lived in a small
they
town
were
for
like,
5 years, and I was yeah, and I was the only foreigner in this small town. So like
"Oh,
everybody in
Lord."
town
So
knew
they
me.
knew
Like
you.
every time, yeah,
Yeah, it's like they knew you and they knew where you were and where you weren't. It's like, "Oh, you were at blah blah
exactly,
blah
yeah.
yesterday. We were looking for you." Exactly. It's like there's no way. I mean, this big of a secret, especially, you know, there's got to be one day in Smallville that
Mhm.
Clark breaks his glasses. You know, it's like. That has to have happened at some point.
Hmm.
So, but
So yeah, I'm
yeah,
not.
I thought that was going to happen too, but it didn't exactly happen. It didn't exactly happen like that.
Yeah.
They,
So I
they
mean, it
kind
was
of,
a. I don't agree with why they did it or kind of like the circumstances surrounding the reveal, but I thought that actual episode
yeah.
was really well done. And up until
Yes.
the end where he just but I think would have been, and my buddy mentioned this on his show, is I think would have been more interesting is if instead of Clark opening his shirt and revealing he's Superman to the rest of the diner, is if everybody in the diner just kind of stands up and just like blocks him, kind of like in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Or if he
Oh,
revealed
yeah.
he's Superman, and then Emmett's like, look, he's Superman, he's Superman. Everyone's like, what are you talking about?
Right. Right. Oh my gosh, that would have been cool. You're
That would have been, I
right.
think that would
That
have been
would
so
have
much
been
better.
so
Yeah.
much. Exactly. That would have been so much
Especially
better.
because we're so close to the end. This happens in episode
Yeah.
7. Then we have 3 episodes left, and they don't really do anything with the fact the identity is completely public now. So it all
Yeah,
just
they
kind of
don't.
felt like if you're gonna do this, you have to really commit to it. And I don't feel like they had enough space to really commit to that idea. So yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown, all in all. But that episode though was one of my favorites of the season. So it's
Yeah.
great episode, really well done the way they did it. But I think there were better or different ways they could have done it. That would have been more
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. For me, the highlight of it was, or the highlight of that whole thing was the dynamic between the kids, because of course the kids have superpowers, and how do they deal with that? But they also kind of let that down too. It's like the kids just, it's like by episode 9, or the last or whatever the last episode is, or the episode before that, it's just they just get mobbed everywhere, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how they're dealing with it. They get mobbed
Yeah,
everywhere.
and that's
And
something
it's
else I
like,
had an issue.
what?
Well, also too, when we get to the last episode and we find out that they've gotten married and they've had kids of their own, so it's like, well, how do they deal with that dynamic then, right? Because
Right.
now that so, I feel like that was all very that was kind of a letdown. I didn't feel like they'd really I don't think they had really thought through like all the ramifications of what revealing this secret identity is. It's one thing if it's just Superman and Lois, but when they have 2 teenage kids around who have superpowers as well, and they have to deal with it too, and I feel like there's a lot of questions that are left unanswered that need to be answered.
Right. But at the same time, I think that they would need at least a half of another season to do that and really do
Yeah,
it well, especially to get to the point where they had gotten in the epilogue
right.
episode, because Jonathan is already having issues with his girlfriend after,
Hmm.
and they're, mobbing her on social media and stuff. That could have been like a whole thing with them, you know.
Yeah.
So I just think that they didn't have time, but they wanted to show them in a good place, and they wanted to
Hmm.
show kind of a continuity thing, which is what people think that continuity
Yeah.
thing is means happily ever after.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
yada yada a lot of stuff to get to the end, to get to the happy ending there. And I feel like, and I
exactly.
think that they wouldn't have had these questions wouldn't have even been a problem if it was just, like I said, that if it was just this idea that it's an open secret in the town, and that would have been it.
Right, right. That would have been cool because, because with that, like you were saying, with that Buffy episode, they said, okay, we know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then there are like at least, was it 3 more seasons or 2 more
Oh
or 3
God, no!
more
It
se
was it
there was
was
like a lot
4 more
more
seasons. It went up to
seasons
season
after.
7. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, 4 more seasons where she's still, fighting and everything. So the dynamic in the town would not
Hmm.
be everywhere that Jordan and Jonathan go that they're mobbed,
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
something like that. It's, I don't know. It's just I just feel like it would be different, especially with a small town. There would be a
yeah.
lot
Well,
more
especially
little quips, I think.
like that.
That would have been
Yeah,
cool.
like the store scene, right? When
Right.
when that girl Denise, she looks up at the TV and she at the plane crash, and then she kind of looks at Clark. She looks back,
She's
and
like,
then
"Are you gonna
and
go?"
he's like, oh, I forgot my wallet. And then he comes, she's like, you're back, all right? He's like, oh, I just ran out to the car. And she's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
we'll go with
yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah,
like, right, exactly. It would have been cool to have a lot more of those scenes,
exactly. I think
or,
it would have been. It would also have been a lot more fun too.
yeah,
It would have been a lot more
exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
Right,
Um.
but yeah. So we talked a lot about these seasons, but they are two very packed seasons. But we definitely want to talk about the last episode. Right before we do, though, Perry, you did mention that there was some, and I try not to, look at any of the behind the scenes or, any of that kind of stuff, shakeups. So, you know, one of the things that but because I've been a fan of a lot of these CW shows, one of the things that kind of is in the back of my mind, especially for Superman and Lois, was kind of how this all fits in. But what I guess from what I'm hearing is that all of these shows, I don't think any of them are still on, right? Is Stargirl still on?
No, no, I'm pretty sure that's gone too. I think they're all. This was. I'm pretty sure this was the last one.
Okay. So, from a fan standpoint, how does Superman and Lois fit in with the Arrowverse? They're from a different universe than Arrow was in Flash, right? Arrow,
Yes.
Flash, and Batwoman are in
So
a different.
right. So originally Arrow, Flash, and Woman and Legends of Tomorrow. Originally they were all from the same universe, and
Yeah.
Supergirl and Black Lightning were originally from separate universes. But then they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths, they brought them all into the same universe in that part.
Yes.
And honestly, I think they should have ended it there, but it
Yes.
all just kind of like puttered out after that. Now, the original plan of Superman and Lois, I believe the original plan was that it was supposed to be part of that new universe as well, because the end of Crisis, Superman is flying back and he talks to Lois, and she says your sons are waiting for you. Whereas in Crisis, it would reveal they had one baby, but now
Right.
it's like they have two sons. So that
Right.
was like kind of like there was gonna be like a reset, and they were gonna have two sons then in that series, and that was gonna continue on there. And there was originally a plan for them to do a crossover episode with Batwoman, but it was canceled because of COVID restrictions. So in
Oh,
the first
okay.
season. So they'd never done the crossover episode. And then by the time they got to season two, the other shows had kind of pretty much fizzled. And even remember, if you may remember, they had Diggle appear in season one as well.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So by the time they get to season two, though, all the other shows had gone. So then there's just this one throwaway line that Sam mentions to the boys at the end of season two, where he says, like, we've seen other worlds where there are other heroes, but on our world, it is only Superman. So that kind of officially established that this is in its own separate continuity. And then they could go in and they could use their own Jimmy Olsen, they could use their own Lex Luthor, which is what they did here. And they have, they brought Tom Cavanaugh on playing a completely different character then as well. So yeah, as of season two, this was officially a separate universe. Whereas in season one, it was kind of unsure. Like some people were saying maybe it is, some people were saying maybe it was, maybe it isn't. So it wasn't
Okay.
quite clear at first. But by season two, it was clear that we don't have to tie it into Arrow anymore because all the Arrowverse stuff is gone.
Yeah. Which is interesting how that all played out. And I guess it was, studio issues and studio problems because at the end of, I think that was Crisis of Infinite Earths, wasn't it? Where they all got together in that warehouse like thing and they were
Mm-hmm.
all were they trying to be like a Justice League kind of thing there or
Yeah, that was the
something?
implication, but then nothing was ever done
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, it was. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what? You're trying to be a Justice League thing, and Arrow is
Right.
not even here anymore. So you got
Mm-hmm.
this one empty chair, and then the rest of the shows. Well, Flash was kind of on its way out at that point. It had like
Flash
what
kept. I think it kept
2 seasons left after that.
two or three. I think it went on for like I think it was maybe three more seasons. Might have been. I think
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Okay.
because yeah, about three more seasons I think came after that.
Yeah.
Because I think it was in its, I can't remember if it's last season. It was still running concurrently with Superman and Lois. Superman and Lois was running kind of concurrently with Flash, and I want to say some others were still running at the same time. So there's some crossover, but they were all on their out. I think by season 2 of Superman and Lois, it was the last man standing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna take Superman and Lois as its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
That started in the Arrowverse, but it's its own thing, which I kind of like that because I think because now that the Arrowverse era is kind of done, I like that
Yeah.
this is it in its own bubble because it is really special to me. And with that, let's talk about the last episode and let's give this thing a rating and wrap this for these episodes, which it'll probably be up.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you think of the last episode and how they wrapped up this series?
I mean, I thought the resolution to the Doomsday and Lex stuff was kind of rushed because feel like they really kind of wanted to get that out of the way, and then it felt very similar to the Supergirl finale in that way too, where they kind of like rushed the final, and then they just focus on the end after that.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like this episode should have been a little bit longer. Right, I feel like it was a little bit. I feel like they should have made it like a double-sized episode or something to give it a little
Yes,
bit more space to breathe.
that's exactly
Um,
what I thought.
but overall, I really liked it, right? Because they had bookended it, right? Because you start off with the first episode with Clark narrating and telling his story about how he got to Metropolis and how he married Lois, and then they had the kids and all that, and then they move into the story, and then it bookends it here with him also narrating the end of his life story. And I thought it was really well done. I liked it. It was definitely overly sappy, but I definitely ate it up. I thought it did a really cool job. They bring in crypto at the end too. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yes.
This idea of him having this like foundation that they're doing to go to help people. We get to see the super team basically, right? You see John and Jordan get their suits. We see Steel gets a more comic accurate suit in the end. He gets the cape finally after all these years, and after the Shaq movie that we're not going to talk about.
Please
He
don't.
finally gets the cape. So yeah, I really dug it. I thought most of that was pretty well done, and the ending when he's going through and he dies. And I think a lot of people misunderstood that whole like afterlife sequence, because a lot of people were saying like, well, why are the boys there and all this. My way of looking at that was Clark kind of like in his that was like his life flashing before his eyes type of thing.
That's what I thought. What
That's
are other
that's the way I
people
thought of it.
saying?
I remember at the time people saying like, wait, how come Jordan and Jonathan are there? How come they're dead? And I'm like, no. So I thought it was trying to
And
say
they're
like this is like
there
him.
but we saw them. See, this is
Exactly.
why I
Yeah.
thought
So
it was. We saw them as adults by his bedside when he
exactly.
dies.
Yeah.
So when we see them again, they're kids. It's his life flashing before his eyes, or
That's what I thought too. Okay.
he's reliving the good times. But I also thought too that it was, you know how like at the end of a lot of series,
Yeah, it was like the cast
people,
bow type of thing. Yeah.
yeah, the cast goes around and that's what I thought it was too. You
That too.
know,
Yeah.
I thought it was
But
that.
also too, like, and I remember some people were also questioning about the Lex thing when he sees Lex there at the table, and like my whole feeling was like that was him letting go of any lingering resentment or hatred he had for Lex Luthor now that he was dying. That's the way I looked at all that, and then the final scene, that is him reuniting with Lois in the afterlife. That's how I took all of that. Like once he walks through
That's
that door,
exactly
then we're
what
in an
I thought
afterlife thing.
too.
Now, one thing
Yeah.
I will say, like, because it was called Superman and Lois, I do kind of wish that when he stepped out of the door, he was in the Superman suit, so that we had kind of had like that closing image of Superman and Lois together. But that's a
Yeah.
small quibble.
Yeah. I agree with that because the thing is he's seeing her at basically when she's like a superhero in his eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we had already had this story that's what I was talking about earlier. We had already had this story about her in that red dress, and he
Right.
just thought that she was just beyond when she was in that red dress. So he should have had his Superman suit on. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
could just be in that moment, you know? I can't believe people didn't understand.
Well, it's like I mean, it goes back. You have this type of thing. Like people talk about again, Superman the movie, when they talk about how does flying around the world backward turning the world, reversing the
Right.
Earth's rotation? I'm like, no, he's
Right.
not actually reversing the rotation. That's visualizing him flying back in time.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. Okay, so people just want to have something to argue about. That's pretty much
Yeah,
what it
yeah.
is.
Media
But
literacy is
yeah.
dead. It's basically what I think it is.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought that the moment that he had with Lex was powerful, to be honest, because
Hmm.
he does forgive Lex. But if you notice, I don't think Lex forgives himself. And that was kind of what he was saying as he was kind of narrating it. That was kind of what or at least what I was getting from it, was that some people can't forgive themselves or can't get out of that loop. And
Hmm.
I'm thinking, he's probably, or he's trying to say that maybe even in death, Lex could not get out of that loop, you know,
Yeah.
of what, evilness that he was in. But for me, I agree. I thought that the first part, the Doomsday part, was rushed. And I thought it was just because they wanted to get Doomsday out of the way. And that was the only way that
Hmm.
they could do it that made any kind of sense. Because by this point, Doomsday is like unbeatable. He's like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, how are you going to actually kill this thing?
Hmm.
So that was kind of rushed. And then the part where they kind of get together in the town so that they can knock him out or whatever, I was like, okay, so we're just getting the heavy hitter players that have been here all 4 seasons. We're giving them another
Hmm.
cameo, you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I felt about that, because I'm like, what happened to the whole town? But then it's also like we were just saying about how they did after, they say Clark Kent is Superman, how the town is reacting is doesn't make sense. But, because I was like, where's the rest of the town? It would have been cool if the town had actually got together, because the town pretty much, or everybody that was awake at the time when Doomsday came back with Superman's body, they were all
Hmm.
looking at him. So it would have been
Yeah.
like, wouldn't it have been interesting to have the town come together and kill this thing? But whatever. But yeah, I thought that was a little rushed. I do like the end. Obviously, from a romance standpoint, that very end where he opens the door and he sees Lois, and it's taking me back to the season 3, and it's taking me back to how he sees her and how he
Hmm.
adores her. That really just got me, right? I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
this is like Superman fans who are not also romance author fans are going to be like, oh, but I am like, oh, this is so cute. I'm like, I was having a moment. I was like, yeah, we were almost crying there. It was just totally cute. I love the way that ended. I will say something I didn't like though, and that may have just been me, and that may have just been kind of where I am in everything. But the whole, his boys grow up and have all of these kids all over the place and everything. I know that was supposed to be kind of continuity, kind of happily ever after kind of thing. They do it in romance novels
Hmm.
often. The happily ever after is showing the couple not just married, but the couple having a family. And then
Right.
sometimes they even make another generation, right? To show that. But, you know, that didn't really do anything for me necessarily. It's good to see them grow up or whatever, but I didn't really need that. And I didn't really need all those kids running around. But the other thing that bothered me about it was there's no way I'm going to know if these kids had superpowers. Which ones had superpowers? Which ones
Hmm.
didn't? How do we know there's all these other little questions that come up when we're talking about family, and we kind of
Well, yeah, the thing I was
we
wondering is,
touched on those too.
yeah, are we still operating as superheroes? Like, what whole situation? Like, and so those are questions that were. I mean, Clark, we can understand, we can kind of accept that he's probably retired now, and then he probably hands it over to the boys at some
Yeah.
point. So I feel like that's why I think they should have did the open secret thing, because that would have made this thing make it a little bit more sense. Then you can kind of imagine how it can still. I also was wondering, was Jordan's wife Sarah or not? Because she looks like, I don't know which was Jordan, which one
Right.
wasn't he tell. But that
Yeah, you
they
you
don't
can't
mention
tell
who
which one is
these women
which.
are. And it's like you
Right.
need to get, it would have been nice to have sort of closure about relationship too.
Yes, exactly. Because I feel like, for me, I feel like Jordan and Sarah are really soulmates. They're just going through some teenage stuff
Mm-hmm.
right now. But if they were in a romance novel, they'd be a second chance romance, and they would get back together when they were adults and they
Well, and
understood
also,
each other.
and she could still travel the world because he's, he can get anywhere in the world in a matter of minutes. So it's not a barrier to their relationship. So yeah, I feel like
Exactly.
they should have given us some closure with that relationship, which I guess that scene at the wedding was supposed to do, when she
Yeah.
talks about how, she still wants to be, she doesn't want to come back to Smallville, but it
Right.
still felt like they weren't really putting the button on that. Also, I like that we got to see Lana and John Henry get married too. Love that
Yes.
aspect of
I
it.
I did. I
Although
love that too.
Lois's fish, I
No.
did feel like Lois's speech at the wedding, I felt like, dude, this is not. Hey, you should only be talking about that. I'm talking about your life.
Right, exactly. I'm like, this ain't your moment. This is their
Uh,
moment.
yeah,
You
yeah,
done had your
yeah.
moment. This is their
Um,
moment.
but I will also say, like, Kyle ended up being having one of the most interesting character arcs over the whole series, because I hated him when we first saw
Yeah,
him in the first season. I'm
yeah, I
like,
didn't
this
like
guy's
him
a
either.
piece of shit. Hope he dies at the end of this. But man, by the end, I'm like, man, I am so for Kyle.
Yes, I'm totally rooting for him. I'm rooting for him and Miss Beppo. I can't remember her first name.
I love her line and Chrissy. I love that line when she's
Chrissy. Yeah.
when Kyle's talking about how he wasn't always the nicest and everything, and how he wasn't very nice to look when they first came to town. And then Chrissy's like, "Did I get knocked out by the town bully?"
You're right. Exactly. I'm like, yes, you did. Actually, when she said that, I said, yes, you did.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Because
Um.
he was just a straight up, but yeah, I agree. I did not like him in the
Mhm.
beginning, and now I'm, here rooting for him at the end, and he had a really interesting character arc.
And
And yeah, go ahead.
I love that he was there when Clark collapsed on the street, and he says, like, right in the
Yes.
same spot where my dad collapsed, but because I had Kyle there, I didn't die that day. I'm like, oh, that like, I love that moment. I love that moment there, that it was
Yes.
Kyle who was there with him, and that they stayed friends in Smallville after all this time. I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole ending of this, yeah, it was sappy, but it was so good. It was like nice syrupy
Hmm.
pancakes. It was so, was so awesome.
Hmm.
But I do agree with you that, it should have taken the Star Trek feel. Should have had a 2-hour finale.
Yeah,
And that,
yeah.
yeah, that way that the first part didn't feel as rushed as it did, because, by this point, Doomsday is the better villain than
Hmm.
Lex, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And so
No, no,
before
I agree.
we,
Like,
yeah,
we got, like I said, we got too much Lex.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like we might have exhausted this, but do you have anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
No, I mentioned everything that I wanted to say. I mean, overall, like, it was such a great show. Like, it didn't end. It didn't. Unfortunately, the ending didn't hit the highs that we got in season three. But I still think they stuck the landing more than anything else. Bit of a bumpy ride to get to the landing, but I still think they stuck the landing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So we do the GoodReads rating here, as you know, and as our audience may remember, we use the GoodReads rating because this is really supposed to be a book podcast. But our rating 1 to 5, 1 star is you didn't like it. 2 stars, it was okay. 3 stars, you did like it. 4 stars, you really liked it. And 5 stars, it was amazing. Now, you may want to give some star ratings for the seasons that we talked about here, season 3, season 4, and you may want to give a star rating for what you thought overall, or you just may want to give 1 or 2 of those, whatever. What did you think star rating wise?
So
And it could
season
be in
3,
between.
definite 5.
Okay.
Yeah, season 3 would be a
Yeah.
definite 5. Season 4, maybe 3.5, bordering on 4. I did like, even though, the problems we talked about aside, I still like season 4 a lot. If I was going to rank all these seasons in order, I would say season 3 number 1 with a bullet, season 1 and season 4 kind of even, maybe season 1 a little bit more, and then season 2 would be my least favorite of the seasons. And overall as a series, let's go with 4.5, I think, overall for the series.
Yeah. Yeah. Any particular, well, you kind of already talked about the reasons why, but you want to add on any reasons why?
I mean, it's just the way that they had grounded the family dynamic, the performances, especially like Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch, just they just brought it. But even like the supporting performance, like this is my favorite take of on Lana Lang that we've ever seen. It's I
Yes.
loved Wole Park, Emmanuel Triki. I'm never sure how to pronounce her last name, but she did such a great job as Lana. I loved Wole Parks as John Henry Irons as Steele. The boys, like we talked about, Natalie, and like we said, Kyle, like surprising how much I ended up liking Kyle by the end there.
Exactly.
And I thought, I didn't like the way that they had written him, but I still thought that Cudlitz did a pretty good job with what he was given, the material he was given.
Yeah.
Bruno Mannheim, like we talked about, and Pia and all them. So yeah, overall, wonderful performances. This is a great take on the Superman mythos, and I feel like people are gonna. It's funny because now people are starting to take another look at Brandon Routh's Superman. They're kind of talking about what a missed opportunity it was. I feel like people are going to be doing the same thing with Tyler Hoechlin in a few years. They're going to be looking back at him and be like, "Oh my God, this is
Hmm.
really good."
Yeah. 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 I'm going to echo a lot of what you said, but I'm going to kind of put a romance angle on it as well for my romance audience. For season 3, yes, 5 stars plus for season 3. For season 4, give it I'm going to give the first half of it 4 stars, and I'm going to give the second half of it 3 stars because I just think that the Lex plot just drug it down. It
Yeah,
started off with some good stuff there, but when the Lex stuff lost the whole plan and became obsessive, then it drug it down. Of
yeah.
course, the very end scene was a 5 star, for me as
Hmm.
a romance person. And for the whole series, I'm giving the whole series a 4.5. I really liked this series and I really wanted more of the series, unlike
Hmm.
the other CW shows, which, like we said, we're going to just put this one in a bubble. But the other CW shows, I lost interest
Yeah.
in them. I started out with Arrow and I was all in it for about 3 seasons and then I was done. Out and
I
I
stuck
and I
with
tried but I couldn't.
Yeah. I stuck with Arrow and Flash until the end because Arrow went up until Crisis, and then I was still all in on most of the shows then. So I stuck with Arrow, and I stuck with the Flash. The last 2 seasons though were such a slog to get
They
through,
were they
and
were horrible to get through.
and I
Yes.
did I did manage to finish the Flash. Supergirl, I got like 4 episodes into the final season, and I skipped to the finale, and I only did that because I was on another podcast talking about stuff that happened in that episode,
Right.
and I was completely lost.
Oh boy.
And I never finished Legends or Black Lightning or I never even really got into Batwoman. I think I saw like only a few episodes of the first season of Batwoman and I just kind of tapped out. So
Well,
yeah, but Superman and Lois, I definitely wanted more. As disappointed I am that it was truncated and this fourth season ended up being the last season. It in a way it's kind of like going back to the Buffy analogy. It's kind of like the way Angel did, because Angel's fifth season was not supposed to be its last season. But then what they gave us in that last season was amazing, and they gave us like the
yeah.
greatest series finale ever with
Yes.
that final episode.
Yes.
And so yeah, I mean, quibbles aside, and I think maybe the quibbles that I have with season 4 show that it probably is a good thing that we didn't get more. But
Yeah.
if they did have more of a budget, maybe we could have gotten something better, a better season 4. So
I think
you're
so.
always gonna be second guessing these things.
Yeah, right, right. I agree. Now that I know about the budget issues and things like that, it's like if they had gone all out, we probably would have gotten a
Mm-hmm.
better season 4. I don't think it would have been better than season 3 though, because for me, especially as a romance author, and especially as someone who also likes dramatic kind of relationship, I also write romantic women's fiction, which is the whole point of it is an emotional journey. So,
Right.
shows like This Is Us and A Million Little Pieces and those kinds of shows, those shows I gravitate towards. And season 3 had that feel. It had the nerdy that I needed with the superhero stuff, but it also had the drama that I needed, without, all the crying from the like with This Is Us. It's constant crying and bawling. So that is why I liked this particular show above all the other CW shows, is because this show has realness, has the authenticity, and it has that family dynamic that you're not seeing in the other shows. The other shows tend to either be like with Arrow, for the time that I watched it, he was just kind of tortured. And so it was kind of going downhill there. And he was just in torture with the Flash, which that was the one that I actually made it through all of it. But those last two seasons, and especially that last one, it was a slog. But they were going towards camp. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these especially DC superhero shows, or especially the live action ones, they tend to go to camp. And camp is okay in the 70s, but in 2025, I kind of want a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
you gotta balance it out a little bit more.
yeah, yeah. But yes, so that's what I'm giving it. I'm giving it a 4.5 overall. I agree. I think people slept on it. And I think with the James Gunn Superman, which I hope to have you back to talk about that when that comes out,
I am
that
probably gonna be
it's
talking about that thing nonstop. So
you
yeah, I'm looking forward to
probably
that.
are. You probably are. But I think when that comes out, depending on how that goes, which I have high hopes, that it's going to bring a light on to, like you said, onto other Superman portrayals, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe on down the line, this one will get looked at again,
Yeah.
and get some eyes on it, which it needs some eyes on it. But yeah, I had a wonderful time with this. And I thank you for hanging on with me and talking about these seasons, because we've talked for a while. This is probably going to end up being 2 episodes, but I've got to have you back. Thunderbolts is already out in theaters, so I got to have you
Have you
back
seen it
for
yet?
that. I have not seen it yet, but I'm
It is
going
good. It's
to.
good.
Oh yes, I have to. I have that on the docket, and of course, Superman again. We
Mm-hmm.
got to talk James Gunn's Superman.
And Fantastic
So
Four's coming out this summer too.
exactly. So I have that one as well. So I'm gonna have you back, Perry. I've got to talk with you about all of this wonderful nerdy superhero goodness.
Always looking forward to it. Always a great time. Always love coming on here.
Hi. Want to get show notes from this and future episodes in your inbox? Then subscribe to Nerdy Romantics newsletter at nerdyromanticspodcast.com /subscribe. Nerdy Romantics newsletter not only has show notes, but nerdy and romantic recs and sneak peeks and exclusives of my spicy nerdy romances and love stories. I love talking sci-fi, superheroes, fantasy, and romance books, movies, and shows with my friends. So share this podcast with your nerdy romantic friends. Thanks for listening and for watching.